It's the Boris Dirk podcast. We are back after a little hiatus. Drew has been moving his life out to Los Angeles, so recording over the last few weeks has been a little bit difficult, but we are back. The NBA season is into the meat of the schedule. We're a quarter of the way through the season, about 20 games for all these different teams. And we thought, in an homage to the no longer professionally writing Zach Lowe, we would all put together a list of the things that we like from this NBA season so far. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Drew Semler. Drew, how are you?
I'm good. And Zach, if you're listening, hire a new social media guy. Like this Instagram stuff, this like 1 foot in the water, not fully back thing is killing us. We miss you, Zach Lowe. And at least get on Twitter. Like we just aren't going to Instagram to see one picture of your kid's Halloween costume and then the next being a series of stills from the Knicks game. At least give us some moving pictures.
And joining me as well is great friend of the show, multi-time guest and coach at Muhlenberg College in Pennsylvania, Coach God. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing great. Zach, if you're listening, hire Drew Semler as your social media coordinator.
Mm.
Fantastic at it.
All right, let's get into it. We've all brought 5 to 10 things that we have really liked or have caught our eye going into this season so far. And I'm going to get started with, we'll see if there's any overlap, but I'm going to get started with Giannis Antetokounmpo having another MVP level season. He's averaging career highs in scoring and assists per game. The Bucks got off to what seemed like a potentially disastrous start, but have rebounded, going 8-1 over their last 9 games. They're now over 500 and beating Pistons pretty handily right now, which should lead to a 9-1 stretch in their last 10. And Giannis is just still Giannis. I'm still really bummed that we haven't gotten playoff basketball from him the last couple years as a healthy version of himself. But God willing, we get that this year because this dude is as good as ever. Andy, I know you're a big Bucks guy. What have you seen from the Bucks this year?
Yeah, the Bucks were my number one thing that I've loved this year. Coming into the season, I had the Bucks versus the Nuggets as my finals pick, and that was looking dark. And now we're back in a beautiful array of sunshine. But the Giannis thing has been incredible. The 6.6 assists per game is a career high for him. And I think it was Doc over the summer who was talking with Bill Simmons about him, that his playmaking was something that really stood out to him and that really shocked him. And I think early on in the year, with all of their struggles, he could have gone into that dark hole of just score, score, score. But he's playmaking for guys. He's still a fantastic rebounder, and he's still putting up 30 plus a game. Like the Giannis games recently are just phenomenal. The better parts of the Giannis post-game press conferences, those are must watch every single night after a win and even after any single loss.
Ricky.
Yep. And we haven't gotten Middleton back. Like this thing could have really gone off the rails. And the fact that they're 10-9, the East sucks. So they're the 5th seed and easily still in the mix. And you get some amazing offensive nights from Dame, some nights where he looks old, but Dame has shown just enough to really have hope for Milwaukee that when Middleton comes back, they can continue to right this ship. And yeah, these last couple of weeks of Giannis have been absurd. I think Jokic has to be the quarter NBA season MVP, but the last couple of weeks have been Giannis's 2 weeks. Like he's just been the top dog, doing it on both ends, and this is absolute peak Giannis. And so I just hope guys like Brooke, Dame, and Chris, when he comes back, can stay healthy. These mid-30s vets who are so key to everything Milwaukee does. I hope they can give Giannis a chance, like you said, because this version of Giannis really deserves a deep run.
Absolutely. And Andy, I'm not sure if you touched on this, but he's taking and making a lot more mid-range shots this year. His mid-range field goal percentage is in the upper 40s right now. I believe they said on the Bucks broadcast tonight, he's second in the NBA in mid-range percentage behind DeRozan, which is a crazy stat given where he's been in the past with that shot. And I don't want him, falling in love too much with that because his best version of himself is still, trying to do his best impersonation of Shaq. But as a changeup in the playoffs, when you can't get past, a 3-man wall or whatever may be the case, with when the Bucks are playing more non-shooters like Andre Jackson or other guys who have worked their way into the rotation, it's a good changeup to have. And the fact that it's going in at this point, we'd like to see that translate to the free throw line as well, where he's at a pretty bad 61% right now. That just whatever reason he can't seem to get that mentally over that hump there, despite getting over it in the highest leverage moments. But yeah, as you said, Middleton back soon, and they with their starting five, and then guys like Gary Trent, Torian Prince, who've looked sort of like reliable contributors for them, guys like AJ Green, they just need a couple guys to step up where they have a reliable 8-man rotation or to be able to make a move for a couple of those guys. And I'm really going to believe in their playoff ceiling. But yeah, Dame's looking more like Dame compared to last year. His scoring's up, his efficiency's up, especially after a cold start in October and November. His shooting splits were really hot, and that's just been continuing in this win streak. So yeah, Bucks and Giannis, first thing.
The fact that you did not say game three King DeLon right there as one of the random Bucks too was really hurtful. But yeah, I think for them, and I know it's way too early to think about playoff picture, but like if they get these Giannis games, and then as Drew was saying, Dame playing a little bit better this year, and then just get, I don't know, a Middleton game, a DeLon Wright game, a Gary Trent game, like if they just build off of those sporadic performances that are not consistent, but from one different guy every night, I think the ceiling is back to what people were thinking before the year. Also, Giannis right now is 10 of 10 from the field. 3 minutes left in the third quarter. Just a little watch right there.
We've seen these superstars attract buyout guys mid-season who can help take them to a slightly different level at the margins. So I hope Milwaukee can pull that off.
Absolutely. All right, Drew, give me a thing.
All right. I'm coming in hot. Something I am really enjoying. This isn't that hot. It's just, something I've been nerding out on. What I'm calling the NBA stock market. The steals plus blocks merchants of the 24-25 season. So far, 40 guys this year are averaging 2+ steals plus blocks, 2+ stocks. Last year, only 30 guys hit that same mark. So something that blew my mind, but I shouldn't be too surprised because this guy's just been on a defensive tear, is that the last guard to average 3+ stocks was Victor Oladipo for the Pacers in 2018. Dyson Daniels is averaging 4 stocks right now, 4.00 stocks. He had 29 steals over a 5-game stretch in November, which I feel like people just sort of moved on from, probably because we weren't, potting. So that's on us. Sorry, community. Wemby, Dyson Daniels, JDub, who along with Dyson is the other guard averaging 3+ stocks for the first time since Oladipo 6 years ago. You've got Tari Eason in this mix. Usually when you look at the top of the stocks leaders, bigs feature heavily just because the blocks leaders get more blocks than the steals leaders get steals. So near the top, you'll see big bodies like AD, Brooke Lopez, Walker Kessler, Evan Mobley. Shout out Goga Batadze, who you'll be nauseated to hear me say I never gave up on. But this year specifically, perimeter guys like SGA, Jalen Suggs, Amen Thompson, who had a slow start but is now just going nuts for Houston as well. These guys are up there. And I think this recent boom in stocks is making defense sexier to the less trained basketball eye and just also to people who love watching these guys make plays. So yeah, NBA stock market, loving it.
Absolutely. We'll be providing periodic stock market updates on the Twitter at Boris Dirk Pods. So stay tuned for that.
We're not on Blue Sky, are we?
We are, but I don't post there.
Andy.
Just to cover the Atlanta Hawks point of that too, like they're really, really fun to watch right now. Just with I know like years ago, Drew, I told you how I thought there can't be a really bad NBA draft anymore because of all the size with the combination of stretching the floor. I think adding in the stock market to that is really fun too. Just having guys with length that can play on the perimeter and then guard multiple positions, whether protecting the rim with the block or guarding the perimeter and getting steals. But the Hawks right now have my eye, especially because of Dyson, especially because of Ricochet, because of Jalen Johnson. I just think the length there's so many different variety of lineups that you can throw out there. It's a coach's dream over there. And then finding ways to put guys next to Trey. I think having those stock market guys are the exact guys that he needs around him. And having Onyeka on my fantasy team really helps too.
Jalen Johnson, what a season so far from Jalen Johnson, who, Max and I have been on this. The numbers when Trey was out last year down the stretch and Jalen was kind of the offensive engine in Atlanta were crazy. He was kind of doing what he's doing now, 20+ points, 10 boards almost every night, awesome assist numbers for a 6'8" ball handler of his archetype, making plays on the defensive end. he's just really awesome. And what I love about Jalen Johnson is that he plays within himself. Every time I watch the Hawks, if they're sagging off him at the 3-point line, he's not panicking. Like that isn't impacting his process. He's handing it off just to a guard, rolling, catching it in the mid post, like making plays for others or dunking on people. He's a really powerful finisher around the rim and just has really rare feel for a 6'8" athlete. So yeah, Jalen Johnson is just the ideal sidekick for someone like Trae Young and kind of epitomizes these athletic traits that they're surrounding Trae with that Andy just mentioned.
Absolutely. 20, 10, and 5 with a steal and a block for Jalen Johnson this year. Like the rebounding is the thing that really kind of jumps off the page because you think he's sort of like a lanky wing. He's going to be more in kind of like the 5 or 6 rebound range, but he's really routinely getting double-digit boards. So that's an absolute core foundational building block for the Hawks and a really interesting pairing with Reza Shea going forward. I mean, jury's still out on Reza Shea, but the theory of both of those guys as multi-tool, huge wings that you can throw at different guys, like that's what the NBA is all about right now. That's what we're seeing with Boston, Orlando, New York, all these, hopefully New York, we'll see, but all these different teams around the league. So yeah. All right, Andy, what's your first thing?
I'm so excited to be the one saying this. I was laughed at last year, not by you guys, but by others, sometimes you guys. But I'm fully back on the Cleveland train. Never left the Cleveland train. I have bought property on every single part of Cleveland. I pretty much own it. So right now, leading the Eastern Conference, I am loving what I'm seeing on both ends of the floor. Mobley is taking the jump. Darius Garland is back. He's healthy. He's shooting a 45% from deep on a career high 6.8 threes per game. Like they're figuring it out. Mitchell is okay passing the ball to Garland at the end of the game. The other night against Boston, it was Mitchell's turn. You can have Mobley taking over too. I think that they're figuring everything out. Sure, the playoffs are a different sport, as I like to say, and it can be a really big challenge there against Boston, against Milwaukee, against New York. But right now, they're doing everything right, and it's really fun to watch.
Absolutely. And we had Spencer Davies from Sports Illustrated on to talk Cavs on our last episode. And since then, they've just kept rolling, basically. They had a big win over a mildly shorthanded Boston team the other night, but still a huge win. And they're cruising towards a top 2 seed in the East. And it seems like at least 2 series are going to have to go through Cleveland. The one thing that does concern me a little bit with Cleveland is, at least as far as their playoff scalability, is they are very much getting it done with depth right now. And as you get further into the playoffs, your mid depth matters a ton, like the quality of your 3 to 6, 3 to 7 in the rotation. But your 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th best players don't matter as much the further you get into the playoffs. And just looking at some of their lineup data, like a lot of their best lineups are ones featuring a lot of bench guys. And I'm curious or dubious that that's going to necessarily hold up in a playoff setting, but it's undeniable the strides that Mobley and Garland have made offensively. Donovan Mitchell is just what he did in that Boston game the other night, just shooting the shit out of the ball in the fourth quarter. Like he needs respect as one of the best pull-up shooters in the NBA. Because like as far as pull-up shooting goes, it's Steph and Dame at the top, just sort of this past generation. And yeah, I guess you could put KD in there as well, although he doesn't like pull up 3 quite as much as those other guys do. But once you get past that tier, Donovan Mitchell's right there with his ability to generate threes off the dribble and knock him down. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing this Cleveland team as the year progresses, and hopefully they can stay healthier than they did last year, which that is one thing their depth certainly will help with. So yeah, Drew, any other notes on Cleveland?
Well, I think the coolest thing to me about this most recent Donovan Mitchell explosion versus Boston is that it came on the heels of a Hawks loss where he started 0 for 12. I watched this whole game, which is also why I'm on the Jalen Johnson wave. Last thing I'll say, drafted him in all 3 fantasy teams. He takes that DeJounte usage and runs with it. Back to Cleveland. Mitchell starts 0 for 12 versus the Hawks, makes a few shots, but ends up 5 for 23. It was a terrible night for him. He just couldn't buy a bucket. Next game against arguably the best team in the league, and he just owns it. And he was by far the most dangerous scorer on the floor. Gets what was it, 35 on efficiency, makes 6 threes. And he's guarding. Like Donovan Mitchell is not the defensive liability he's looked like in the past few years. And that's a huge reason the Cavs look like a more balanced team. I was not a fan of his body language down the stretch last year. Like I was, even though I ended up having the Cavs as my 2 seed, I just wasn't. Um, I didn't expect them to be this good, and I didn't expect them to be this potentially dangerous a contender, just because I thought they didn't look that competitive in the highest pressure moments last year. But the whole vibe is different now, in part because Mitchell and Garland are competing more on defense, and Kenny Atkinson just has this equality of opportunity on offense that just has their team feeling alive again. We haven't even mentioned Ty Jerome, whom I played Little League Baseball with and beat in one-on-one hoops when I was 12 or 13.
Let's go.
Ty Jerome, really late bloomer, fucking awesome player. And it's really cool to see him carve out a career in his late 20s after kind of being in and out of rotations around the league. He's been incredible, and he's just a great decision maker. And he's been empowered to do the things he does really well, which is like set other guys up, make threes, and keep the ball moving. And I think Ty Jerome kind of has been like a symbol of the great energy shift in Cleveland. There's more selflessness, there's more celebration of others' success, and there's a lot of like production to go around. It feels like Evan Mobley has been absolutely awesome. I can't tell you how many times I've seen Evan Mobley get like 3 offensive rebounds in one possession and then hustle back and block someone's shot and not get the ball back on offense, but still keep competing like he just wants it more than anyone else on the floor. So yeah, I'm definitely this. It's impossible to watch this Cleveland team and not feel like something has dramatically changed and they have a chance. Like this team has a chance. If they can stay healthy, I think that they could give Boston trouble in a series. I'm already there.
One more thing about the Ty Jerome note, just to stay positive as we like to do. Just it makes me think about future free agency, starting out in Phoenix, being around Booker, OKC for 2 years, being around that entire culture, and then Golden State for 1 year, being around Curry and everything there. It makes me think about young guys that really didn't develop maybe from the start, but were around that culture, and then getting that next second chance or third chance there. It makes me think about other guys down the line that could take that next jump too, similar to Ty.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I guess I'm the Bond temps here for Cleveland, the Debbie Downer. Moving on, my next thing, I'm going to go with the arrival of the 2022 NBA draft class. This is a draft class which at the time was seen as like strong-ish, but no real generational talents in there. And I think that's largely played out, but I think Paolo Banchero and Chet Holmgren have looked closer to generational talents than the consensus was going into that draft. And everyone already knew that those two guys were good, along with Jalen Williams. Once we got past their rookie year, this pod knew before their rookie years that Jalen Williams was good. But the other guys from that class have started arriving as well. And it's an important reminder that we should be patient with our young guys before totally writing them off. Guys who've arrived this year include Jaden Ivey, who really, had an uneven rookie year, barely got on the court relatively to what was expected under Monty Williams last year, and this year has just kind of taken off in a real way. Benedict Mathurin, who despite a disappointing Indiana Pacers start, and we're probably not going to be talking about them on the things that we like today, Mathurin has been scoring the ball really well and been one of the few bright spots for that team. Then you have Shaedon Sharpe, who on a night-to-night basis can look like an absolute stud in Portland, depending on when you catch him. And then other role guys like Ochai Agbaji in Toronto, who's made a jump from, can't stay on the court to solid rotation guy, which is meaningful. And then we mentioned Dyson Daniels in the stock market report, who's just blossomed now that he's getting consistent regular minutes into maybe the best guard defender in the NBA. So I've loved, especially since that was the first draft I evaluated in sort of a deep way in 2022. I've loved seeing some of those guys really start to pan out this year. And I don't know if there's anyone I didn't mention for either of you guys that you'd like to shout out, or anyone from the class I mentioned that's really stuck out to you, Drew.
Well, I was just going to talk about JDub. Like that was one of my things I like. Person, not thing. Come on, media, have some ethics. I was just going to talk about JDub's power and like his physical development, because Max, one of our shared scouting claims to fame that we'll never shut up about, and the evidence is in our 2022 pre-draft pods, is that Max and I had, well, Max had Jalen Williams sixth on his final board. I had JDub in my top 10. As a refresher, the Thunder picked JDub 12th, earlier than most expected, and it was kind of the culmination of his stock skyrocketing right before the draft. But despite Max's extreme belief in JDub, I was somehow higher on JDub's athleticism. Still, neither of us had any idea that JDub was a borderline elite NBA athlete with his combination of strength, length, speed, vertical pop. But I think what we and Sam Presti underestimated with JDub even was the physical development his body at age 21 still had coming. Because JDub was an extremely late bloomer, sort of like Ty Jerome, but this is a whole nother scale. JDub grew 9 inches in the middle of high school and probably weighs 30 pounds more now than he did as a junior at Santa Clara. So JDub at 21 was more like where most 18-year-old prospects are in their physical trajectory. And his extreme basketball intelligence was evident in college. He had the feel, the processing speed, the shooting touch. But in year 3, his downhill force, like the closing speed, the power with which he attacks angles, finishes above the rim, it's just a different beast than even the believers saw coming. And yeah, as you highlight this draft class, I thought I'd mention what a two-way monster JDub has become.
Absolutely.
One thing about that class, and just going back to the like finding ways to impact winning, and this is really coach talk, but I think a lot of these guys highlight being great at what you are really, really good at, and finding things that you're really, really spectacular at and executing on that gives you a really strong role in the NBA. Sure, JDub is an outlier where he's doing multiple things. But other guys like Ochai, like Dyson Daniels, like everyone else there, I think they're finding areas to impact the game by not trying to do everything, but do one thing really well. And it's giving them a really great chance to be in the game early.
For sure. Didn't mention Tari Eason, who also, people knew he was good coming into this year, but he's really taken a big step forward in sort of the public consciousness. Excited to get Mark Williams back on the floor too as well, but now we're getting really niche into the 2022 draft. So, Drew, another thing, go for it.
The Blazers without Anthony Simons and DeAndre Ayton. This is a little bit belated, but Simons and Ayton were injured for like half of November, and the Blazers were shockingly fun to watch. They played like 500 basketball in this stretch, often had no one under 6'6" on the floor. They looked tough as shit. They defended their asses off. Shout out to Mani Kamara. Somehow this second round pick is the heart and soul of our organization. And Donovan Clingan, who's now out for a couple weeks because we just aren't allowed to have fun in Portland, looked like one of the best rim protectors in the universe, in our solar system. Donovan Clingan was a block machine. He was the last standing guy in the league to have had a block in all of his team's games until this recent injury. He outlasted Wemby. He outlasted Walker Kessler, Chet, the other names you'd expect to be on that list. It was really interesting just to see the potential of a Blazers team without Anthony Simons that can play full switchable wings and bigger bodies. And frankly, I just think we're much tougher without Simons and Ayton. And it just got me a little bit more hopeful for the future.
Yeah, I had Portland down too. They're really fun. They're always like the last game of the night, and you throw them on if you're done with like other games, you have them on in the background, then you really focus in on them. They're 500 at home. A theme which I might get to in another one is that almost everyone in the West is 500 or better at home, except for Sacramento, which they really need to remedy that soon. And then 2 teams that are not competitive in Utah and New Orleans. But they're 500 at home. So many young guys look like solid role players. You mentioned Kamara and Clingan. Delano Banton is just kind of like a fun guy who goes out there and scores at a really high level. And then the night-to-night excitement of Shaedon Sharpe, where you have the potential to see like a dunk that breaks the internet or a barrage of step-back threes. You also have the moments where it's like, why is Shaedon hijacking the offense so much and shooting so much? But that's the give and take of a young player early in his 3rd year. And yeah, they could be an interesting trade deadline team because I really like their young guys, and they do have some interesting pieces between Robert Williams, who if I was them, I would trade immediately. I know Blazers fans have kind of fallen in love with what he's brought to the team, but with that guy's injury history, if you can get a 1st round pick for him, doesn't matter how late, like you got to do that. just we saw last year, like he missed the whole year. He's had so many years in his career where he can't stay on the court, and he's dynamic enough that a contending team that feels like they're a big man away may feel like they can give a late 20s pick and he'll be sort of their missing piece. But if I was them, I would try to cash in immediately just for fear of him getting injured. And with the other bigs they have on the roster, like they have Klingon, they have Ayton, they don't need Robert Williams to like eat minutes and give them a solid big presence. Then there's the night to night excitement of what's Scoot Henderson going to look like. Because some nights it looks really good and he's getting to the rim at will and passing the ball, and some nights it looks really bad. And he obviously hasn't yet looked like what we envisioned in the 2023 draft. But as I mentioned with the 2022 draft, you have to give these guys time. Guys like Jaden Ivey and Mathurin look so much better this year than they did in their first 2 years. So not selling Scoot stock yet, and he's definitely looked better than he did as a rookie, but that certainly is part of the night-to-night excitement in Portland.
I'm glad you brought up the trade deadline too, because I was gonna ask Drew, like from the Blazers fans' perspective, who are the non-tradables for you? Like who would you not get rid of on this roster?
Definitely wouldn't trade Scoot. There are still the nights where Scoot looks like a young De'Aaron Fox, just a point guard prospect with real potential. It hasn't been what we expected, the first year and a quarter in, but I still believe in Scoot, and I think he'd be one of the league leaders in assists if he played on a team with more shooting. Scoot has so many good setups, like almost assists, that don't materialize in the box score. So Scoot's off the board. I highly doubt they would trade Denny, since we just traded a couple picks for him. Tumani, untradeable, even though like he's the guy that every contender would want.
Klingon.
I think we got it. We got to be willing to part ways with Jeremy. He's just on a different timeline, and he makes like 30 mil, so it isn't really easy for good teams to go and get him. But yeah, off the top of my head, the untouchables are probably Scoot, Denny, Tumani, Shaden, Klingon. As fun as it's been to watch some of these young guys find their identities, you can't be too precious. Like, we're just years away. And I don't believe in tanking, but I do believe in getting something for the value that will, eventually not exist on your roster.
Yep. All right. Give me another thing, Andy.
I'm so glad you said the word tanking, because I have had a full change of heart. My next thing is Brooklyn.
Woo!
I am the Brooklyn satellite guest here. And I love what I'm seeing after hating what I was seeing early on. I went into the year saying, don't win a game. I want Cooper. I want Khan. I want Khan over Cooper, but we'll get to that later. But they're winning games and they're playing hard. And I love what Jordy is doing with this team. And I've changed my entire mindset about tanking, about what this team should do, because of what is going on in Philly. And I know I said I would be positive, but just I think building that culture around being okay losing and getting picks and getting the right guys that aren't the right guys at the end of the day is not what leads to a winning culture. And I think maybe this team will not end up with the best odds to get the first pick, but I think what they're building on this season is going to show so much growth down the line. And that starts with Jordy. It starts with the young guys that are playing really, really hard. I went to the Nets Magic game the other night. They lost by like 30 points. It was a blowout from the get-go. Nobody played. It was a clear tank game. But the guys did not play that way. Jordy did not coach that way. He was on his feet the entire time. Guys on the bench were getting up off of little 4-0 runs that cut it from 30 to 26. Everything that I'm seeing from this team right now is what I grew to fall in love with in the early Kenny days. All I'm wishing is that we don't get Luka in 3 years and then he fires Jordy and we hire someone else who then runs us into the ground. Stick the path. Don't rush it. Have fun with the young guys right now. Enjoy Cam Thomas scoring 40 and then going 1 of 16 the next night. Like everything right now is fine. It's going to follow the right course.
This is so annoying. You've neutralized me as a shot blocker. I was ready to just yell at you. I was ready to initiate a violent encounter because Portland fans are so damn jealous of Brooklyn's coach. We'd have to attach probably 4 first-rounders to Chauncey Billups to get a coach like Jordy Fernandez. And I love that Jordy doesn't give a shit that the Nets front office wants their team to suck. Nick Claxton, probably your best player, having a bad back and unable to play 30 minutes, no problem. Guys sitting because they stubbed a toe or to quote, manage injuries that never happened, no problem. Cam Thomas thinking he's Kobe Bryant, no problem. Ben Simmons thinking he's pre-COVID Ben Simmons, no problem. credit to Jordy. Also, Dennis Schroeder has finally brought his FIBA swag back to America. He's been a beast at point guard for them. Yeah, Jordy is an awesome coach, and Cooper Flag is overrated. And even if he wasn't overrated, you get a 14% chance of getting him at best. So, Andy, I am so happy that you are enjoying this all before Sean Marks trades every competent player you guys have left.
Yeah, it's reminiscent of past Utah Jazz years where they start competent and then it just sort of slowly falls apart and they start trading guys. And we've seen teams sort of get off to like relatively hot, like 8-8 type starts, and then it just sort of falls apart. I still think that. Well, I was kind of higher on them than I remember we did our like NBA team tiering with Sean Davis, and I did not have them in like the worst of the worst tier. And you guys, I think, thought that was a little outlandish, but I just looked at their roster and I thought these are all respectable NBA players like Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, Claxton, Schroeder, Cam Thomas. The list goes on. Like they have a number of respectable guys, and I think they can still trade 2 to 3 of them for a first or multiple firsts and still maintain like a competitive team, which I think like I wouldn't completely gut the team, but I think if you can get good first round pick for Cam Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith, like that's an avenue to take, or a first round pick for Dennis Schroeder. Like I still think from a team building perspective, it would be malpractice to at least not explore those avenues, even if you're not completely gutting the team. But yeah, they've been super competitive, and they just went on a West Coast road trip recently where I think they had a winning record, which is very hard to do in the West, given all the winning home records.
In my defense, though, their over under was like 19 and a half. I took their over in my over under pool. I had them in my bottom tier in part because I knew they were going to start trading their guys. And I totally agree with you. If they just had these guys all year, like they would be in an easy way over, and probably a team you couldn't put in that bottom tier with like the Washingtons of the world. But it was just so clear after the McCall trade that their goal was to be really, really bad. And this roster will look dramatically different in a few months. But it's just kind of emphasized for me the idea that tanking is for perpetual losers. You got to play to win. You got to build winning habits, hold everyone accountable, no pressure, no diamonds. And like who in the last few years, especially since they flattened the lottery odds, and like I said, everyone has a 14% chance of getting Cooper Flag in like the top 3 or 4 or whatever it is. Who's really glad they threw a few years in the trash recently? Probably Wemby's team, and I can't really think of anyone else.
Yeah, OKC even only threw a couple, and the only like abject tanking year was when they got Chet. Aside from that, like they were still a competitive team. So I think that's definitely the model that you want to try to follow if you can.
We don't have to stay on this team any longer. I just want to say one name for the listeners to know about early before he becomes an NBA superstar. Noah Clowney's getting his love on this podcast. Finally, about time. He's shooting 30% from deep on 4 threes a game. He's 6'9". He's long. He's everything that this pod and that the world should love. He is everything I love. If they trade him, they trade me. We can move on.
Yeah, he might be in next year's version of this when we talk about the 2023 draft class arriving. All right, on my second screen here, the New York Knicks are up 34 in the third quarter against Orlando. They've put 96 on them through 2.5 quarters. Orlando's the best defense in the East. My thing is,
here he goes.
I have to talk about the Knicks offense. They have the best offensive rating in the league. Their defense is 22nd. So literally, if they can just get the defense to average, like that's if you have number 1 offense and average defense, like you can make the finals. They might be able to make the finals as is, but you really need that average defense. And just focusing on their offense, because we're being positive. Number 1 in offensive rating. They have 10 games this season already with 30 plus assists, which is generally like a good benchmark for a good ball movement game. And last year, really through Jalen Brunson's tenure, they've been a very sort of slow, deliberate isolation team. This team is by no means an elite ball movement or pace team, but they are miles ahead of where they've been the past couple years. 30 plus assists 10 times this year. It might be 11 tonight. They only did it 10 times all of last season, and they played 20 games. everyone except for Mikal Bridges is having like the most efficient season they've ever had, pretty much. Cat is off to an absolutely uproarious start. His shooting splits are 53% from the field, 45 from three, 85 from the line, just like absurd. Career high in rebounding, passing the ball better than I expected, and turning the ball over less than I expected. Two things that Tibbs loves to drill into players are low turnovers and high rebounds. Towns is doing both of those things. OG is averaging a career high 17.4 points per game and has the most dunks in the league of any non-big. Josh Hart is shooting almost 80% at the rim. I believe he's second in the NBA in rim field goal percentage among high volume finishers, and everyone else on the list is like 6'10 or more. This
Yeah,
team,
it's like Jason Tatum and a bunch of centers.
yeah, it's like Wemby, Jared Allen, Anthony Davis, and Josh Hart, and Jason Tatum down at 10. But it's just been a crazy offensive start, and it seems very sustainable. Like they've had some hot shooting, but also some things that seem like they'll regress the other way. And this is fully like an elite stamp at offense. There's a very clear top three in both offense and defense in the NBA. With offense, it's Cleveland, Boston, and New York, not in that order. And in defense, it's Orlando, OKC, and Houston. Those three are like a clear tier above everyone else on those two ends of the floor. And the Knicks right now are taking it to Orlando, who's one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. So the offense has been better than I expected. I didn't expect number one. I thought they'd be a top five offense. And if they can, it's been a kind of a frustrating start to the year because their efforts have been pretty uneven, particularly defensively. But if they can just get that defense to league average, this team is going to be really terrifying to play.
Yeah. On the note of their defense, like obviously the one constant bright spot is OG Anunoby. And one of the things I like that I put down was just, and I've talked to you about this, is just OG, the dance floor king, because it reminds me of when like you're a kid and you go to a dance party. In my world, it was mostly bar mitzvahs, but like, the kids make a circle and they just start pushing out the one kid into the middle who has moves. And like, that is the Knicks defense with OG Anunoby. It's like, oh, there's a dangerous wing scorer, perimeter scorer. Like OG just emerges from the pack and he's just guarding whoever it is. And it's just a wheel. And OG is just popping out of the Knicks defense to take on whatever challenge they need, whatever hole needs to be plugged. He's incredible. And he just like deserves to have more effort around him. And also, like you said, things are looking less atrocious than they looked at the very start. And Cat is trying. It's just Cat has limitations on that end, just because things have gotten really pretty for you guys. And I don't want you to feel too much peace right now. I'll just remind you that I would rather have Isaiah Hartenstein than Karl Anthony Towns, but that's just my personal basketball philosophy. And I know it wasn't one or the other. I know you didn't lose, you didn't lose Hartenstein to get Cat, and you just couldn't fit Hartenstein into the books on that timing. But yeah, it's been a wonderful offense to watch. And I think something that I didn't appreciate about Cat the last few years, especially just because he played more off ball, is his incredible decel. Like he gets into the paint and can kind of slow his stride and just give people a chance to find a crease. And he's had a couple of those, especially in transition, where he just attacks and like there isn't a defensive body big enough in the league to like really stop Cat. Like Cat at full speed is carving out space, and then he slows down near the rim and just gives his teammates a chance to get open, whether it's for an at rim finish or like a shooter on the perimeter. So yeah, I've had a blast watching Cat, and it's just a reminder that like what guys show in their roles for certain teams, especially on really good teams, doesn't always reflect like what they have remaining in their bag. Because Cat just wasn't asked to do a lot of these things in this most recent iteration of Minnesota. And immediately post this Cat trade, I heard so much about how maybe it would actually work for Minnesota's offense because Julius just can do more on the ball and maybe initiate more, create more out of nothing, and kind of be the secondary engine after Ant. And I wasn't even sure I bought it at the time, but I definitely don't buy it now, just seeing all the things that Cat can do with the ball in his hands when you ask him to.
100%. His driving has been so impressive. Just wanted to co-sign that.
Promise I'll stay positive here too, Max, about this. Which is hard for me to do, but I'm gonna do it. The Jalen Brunson playmaking is what really stood out to me. I got really worried early because we took him in fantasy before Maxi, and I was having a panic attack with those early games. But a career high 8 assists, having all these weapons around him in the starting five, having Deuce off the bench too. I just think we're seeing a different style of Brunson that the fans fell in love with last year, which is so much more exciting now too, especially with what he can become during the playoffs when it slows down and then he actually has to be the guy to score the ball late too. I think adding in this, obviously he already had the playmaking, but this next level he's taken there makes this offense unstoppable.
Yeah. I just was going to say, like, for a guy who shoots so much, I think Jalen Brunson is a really selfless player and kind of malleable teammate. And Max has been all over this, just like that the new wrinkle in Brunson's game is how he's able to operate more as a true point guard when his teammates are really feeling it and like he wants to activate other people's skills. There were moments in the early playoffs last year where I felt like Brunson was still adjusting to the way officials had kind of changed the whistles a little bit and kind of was like forcing contact and not getting calls. But like, it's so rare that I watch Jalen Brunson and feel like he's forcing shots, even when he's taking 25 shots in a game. He just is a guy who will do whatever it takes to generate the most efficient possession for his team.
Yep, he's a whatever it takes guy. And I've been talking the last few years, or just sort of analyzing from the last few years how Brunson has added something to his game every season, basically of his career. When he was a young player, it was getting better as a 3-point shooter. Then it was getting better at pulling up, particularly in the mid range. Then it was getting to the foul line more often. Then it was increasing his 3-point volume. This year, it's been his playmaking. And these stats are from a week ago when I tweeted them, so I'm not sure if they should still be around the same, but career high in assists per game while decreasing his turnover total from last year, which is big. 3.4 over a 3.4 assist to turnover ratio, which is pretty elite. Creating 20 assist points per game, which is 3 more than he had last year, and a career high assist percentage as well, which is just like the percentage of honestly, I don't totally know what assist percentage is, but it relates to how much you pass the ball. I've loved the way he's played, and just with the new and improved offensive environment around him, he hasn't had to shoulder as much of a burden, and that's definitely something we saw in the playoffs. It didn't really start to wear down until like the team really collapsed around him, but it would just be nice to not have him carry the entire offense on his back for like 20 games at the end of the season because the entire team is out. Like with the added space and Josh Hart's ability to penetrate, Karl Anthony Towns averaging, 25 points a game, Bridges hopefully getting himself together, and he's looked better over the last couple games at home. His home road splits are kind of insane. The offense is just, we've spent a lot of time on the Knicks, so we can move on, but it's been a joy to watch on that end of the floor. Drew, another thing?
Yeah, I'm running out here. I did OG. I also just put a few bullet points of like things I love. We talked about the Hawks, but DeAndre Hunter's pull-up shooting, as Andy highlighted earlier. AJ Mitchell, one of Max and my favorite rookies, a guy I think we both had around our top 20. He went in the second round and is actually like in the rotation, not firmly in the rotation, but actually playing minutes on what many consider the deepest team in the league. I wrote down AJ Mitchell runs like he's holding a small purse in his other hand. He reminds me of that old like Alex Rodriguez meme of when A-Rod like swatted the ball out of the fielder's glove at first base, and then people made like pictures of A-Rod holding a purse while running the bases. That's like the fun AJ Mitchell gate. But AJ Mitchell is the real deal, and it's not clear that he'll ever be able to spread his wings in OKC. Not because they don't have an awesome system, but just because they have so many guys who are ready and like they're trying to win a title this year. I wrote Amen Thompson's recovery speed. He's just a one-man transition defense in Houston. And there's been so much made about the Terror Twins. We shouted out Tari Eason earlier, but I've just seen a couple plays now this year where Amen Thompson, whether it's he turns it over or a teammate turns it over and the other team has a transition opportunity, and he just hits a different gear. I don't want to say Russell Westbrook-esque because I'm not sure anyone will ever touch prime Russ's speed, open floor velocity, but Amen Thompson cleaning up problems for Houston's transition defense is something to behold. And he's just slotting in now to a role that is perfect for him. He might never be like the on-ball creator that maybe his biggest fans wanted him to be. He might just be an incredible Swiss Army knife who kind of plays both forward positions, and the way that Jalen Johnson is almost Atlanta's point guard in transition. I think over time, Amen Thompson can become like the creator in transition opportunities. And after that, he's just like flying to the rim and making plays on both ends.
Yeah, and the vision for Amen is I guess kind of like an Iguodala sort of type. Just sort of the secondary playmaking and creation, and then just the lockdown defense and transition force. Kind of young Iguodala before sort of the shot developed and all that. Yeah, we should mention Houston. Like we got to talk about Houston. They've got one of the best defenses in the league, and they've just completely shut the water off for like every offense that comes to town. They were a team that we were both high on before the season, but high on in the sense of like this team could surprise people and make the playoffs, not high on in the sense of this is a top 2 or 3 team in the West, which is what they are right now.
I had them as my 8 seed.
Yeah.
I did it.
On Amen, it's a very small sample size because they play their starting lineup a ton. There is not a single other lineup configuration of 5 guys that's over 53 minutes, and their starting lineup is close to 300. Some Tibbs numbers right there. But the starting lineup, when you swap in Amen Thompson for Jalen Green, has a 33 net rating, plus 33, which they might want to try experimenting with that a little bit. You know, maybe there's not enough shot creation with Van Vliet, Amen, Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith, and Şengün, but I would like to see that lineup get a little bit more run just because defensively I think it's crazy. And yeah, we were on that their bench was going to be super fun to watch when Tari Eason and Amen Thompson come into the game. We thought Reed Shepherd might have a little bit more to do with it. He hasn't really gotten as much playing time as we might have expected early on. But yeah, Houston is just an absolute pain to play against. Like they're young, they're athletic. I saw it with the Knicks when they came to town earlier this year, and their offense was just completely gummed up. Like you come into Houston and you're not prepared to compete as if it's a playoff game, you're probably going to get embarrassed. And that's what they've been doing to most teams they play this year.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the reason Reed Shepherd has disappointed us early on or just hasn't had the opportunities is that Fred VanVleet is like the glue of this team. His efficiency numbers will always leave something to be desired. I feel like every time I watch the Rockets, he's going off, but he's always struggling to break 40% from the field. He's shooting 34% from 3 on high volume. Like that's always going to be closer to 38, 39 for him. We know he's a great shooter. But yeah, it's just, I think you and I agreed that they would be kind of like around 12th on offense, 12th in defense. If I remember, that's what we said. And what we were wrong about is that they've just blossomed into an elite defense. And that's kind of the bedrock of this team is the grit and, the defense and rebounding. And Jabari Smith is not exactly what Houston wanted him to be, but he's a good fit next to Alperen Şengün with his secondary rim protection and his shooting. So like, yeah, the pieces are just fitting together really well. And I feel like their offense hasn't even hit its ceiling. And I agree with you that Jalen Green playing the second most minutes on this team doesn't quite make sense because despite his talent, he's not been the second best player on the Rockets.
All right. I've got only one more, which is the Spurs. They are, I think, somewhat quietly kind of looking like last year's Houston. They are great at home and not great on the road, but they have not played very many they've only played one Eastern Conference game this year so far, so that schedule is probably going to get a lot easier as they start playing more of those East teams. They're 8-4 at home, so winning 2/3 of their games at home, and 3-5 on the road, 11-9 overall, which is good enough for the 10 seed in the West. But Chris Paul is doing his thing. Like he gets to a team and they get better. Every single place he's been in his career, they've won more when he's been there than they did the year before, and usually by a lot. The Spurs are per cleaning the glass, which filters out garbage time, 18 points better per 100 possessions with him on the court than off, which is in the 98th percentile of all players in the NBA. It might not feel like he's doing a ton out there when he's scoring like, 10 points and getting his 7 or 8 assists, but his organization and just, for lack of a better term, like floor generalship has really elevated this team. Wemby is I feel like has not gotten a ton of buzz this year, but he's averaging 24, 10, and 4 assists, leading the league in blocks again at just under 4 per game. And the Spurs have the equivalent of what would be the NBA's best defense when he's on the court, or at least top three. And when he's off the court, they're a little below league average. They're getting Sohan back this week. Stephon Castle has looked good for them as well. And yeah, they're just a fun, exciting team that we thought might kind of make some noise and make some of these older teams sweat as far as making the play in. They might make some of these older teams sweat as far as getting into that top eight or even possibly higher with the way that they're playing right now and getting guys back healthy between Vassell and Sohan. So they're a team that I've only started focusing on more recently, but I'm excited to watch them a little bit more going forward because they have a really fun outline and Wemby is just fun to watch at all times.
Yeah. Wemby had 34, 14, and 11, 3 blocks, a steal at Sacramento on Sunday. And Jeremy Sohan posted that line on Instagram and wrote normal, but not normal. And it's true. It's just like Wemby is so fucking amazing that it's just what we've come to expect from him. He puts up a line like that and you don't really bat an eye. But there isn't like a real like mainstream statistic that is being dominated by one player like Wemby is dominating the league in blocks right now. And even if Chet was healthy, I think Wemby's still at a pace that like no one else can compete with. Like nobody has 50 blocks right now total in the league. Wemby's missed a few games and he has 61. He's just he is like the stocks merchant of the NBA right now. Even with Dyson on the run, Dyson is on, and it's truly wild. And I haven't checked the scores tonight, but I know that Jeremy Sohan was expected to return. So things could get even better than they've been the last few days for San Antonio. Love Jeremy Sohan.
Yep.
I've loved what I've seen from Castle. I've had 4 Spurs in my fantasy team so far this season. Castle has been a consistent one there. He's just so much fun to watch, and I'm not comparing him to SGA, but I think having Chris Paul on the team now when he's really young is just incredible to see what he can really become from these years learning. Just like SGA always talks about his time with Chris Paul, what he learned about winning there, what he learned about playing the point guard position. There's no better guy for Castle to learn this from, especially already having that killer instinct that he had during the UConn days.
Yeah.
Sohan leading the team in scoring, 3 for 4 from the field in the second quarter. Let's go. That's all I got. Do you guys like anything else?
I like that my top 5 predictions for offense and defense have been pretty good so far, as well as my 4 favorite win total over-unders. It's a shame I didn't bet on any of these things, but my 4 favorite win total over-unders, the surprisingly competitive Detroit Pistons, not a surprise to listeners of this show, as well as the Orlando Magic, the Houston Rockets, and who was the 4th team?
We didn't really talk about the Magic, but the fact that they're 15-7, soon to be 15-8 because they're getting pummeled by New York tonight, but 9-1 in their last 10 with only a few games of Paolo before he went out this year is a testament to how deep they are and how right we were about the Magic being one of the best teams in the East. It's been awesome. Like they do not, I mean, and also we haven't even mentioned Franz, but if we're going to be talking about the guys who have taken a real leap this year, like obviously Franz is right at the top of the list.
It was Memphis. Memphis was the other team I didn't have them as a like, but they are, because I haven't watched them a ton, if I'm being honest, but they're borderline top 5 in both offense and defense, despite having missed Ja. They played a pretty easy schedule. We'll see once they start getting into more competitive parts of their schedule, but their rookie Jalen Wells, who I didn't even scout coming into this draft class, has looked really good for them. He's been one of the best rookies in the league. And Jaren's having a bounce back year. Ja just came back, so I'm excited to dive more into them over the next couple weeks as well.
Just because I gave the listeners Noah Clowney's name, I want to give the listeners Paige Bucker's name, who everyone already knows. One last thing that I really love, Paige over Caitlin Clark. I will be saying it till the day that I die. Paige is doing incredible stuff at UConn. I'll come back later to talk more about this, but last thing that I really like.
W corner. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll be back soon. Peace.
Boris Dirk.